What's up, guys? My name is Almahdi. I'm a seven-figure Airbnb superhost, and this is going to be a complete A to Z, step-by-step Airbnb Masterclass training where I'm going to teach you how to go from zero to over six figures on Airbnb with or without owning a property. And what I'm specifically going to focus on is Airbnb rental arbitrage and how to buy a property in 2025 for a rate at 3 to 5%. Okay, so yes, that's still possible. That's exactly how I've been buying Airbnb properties, and that's what you can do as well. So make sure you've got your notepad ready. We're going to do a complete deep dive, and I'm going to pour out everything that I know on how you can succeed in 2025 with Airbnb, because the game has completely changed this year and into the future. So let's get right into it. Number one is market research. Okay? This is going to be the most important step when you're starting, because right now in 2025, regulations have changed. Where you can't do Airbnb has completely changed. And this is also going to help you figure out right from the get-go how profitable your Airbnb is going to be. So what I try to typically start out with for students is make sure, if you can, starting with an area around you within 2-3 hour drive maximum. It's not required. You absolutely can go out of state when you start out. But as a beginner, it's much easier if you're a little more familiar with the area and you can get to the property to get your hands kind of dirty before you start going out and scaling in different cities and honestly even different countries, right? Once you've got the formula down and you understand what you're doing, you can then go out and scale. So how do we do our market research? So two primary methods, and you're going to use a combination of both of them. Number one, funny enough, is just going to be Airbnb.com. And number two, which is extremely important, is AirDNA.co. So what do I mean by Airbnb.com? Once you figure out what cities or towns, you can actually type in the name of the city or a particular area that you're in or looking to do Airbnb, and Airbnb will actually tell you what those rules and regulations are legally from their actual website. So that's a good place to start. Obviously, there's Google, but then there's also AirDNA when it comes to figuring out occupancy and all these different metrics, revenue, how much properties are grossing in that area on Airbnb or VRBO. And this is going to be one of your most important tools that you use. So what are we looking for when we go to AirDNA.co? Once you've figured out generally what cities you want to start looking at, so let's pick, I don't know, Washington, D.C. or Miami, any one of these cities. When you plug in that city into AirDNA, it's going to give you all sorts of metrics, okay? The two most important metrics that I like to look at initially are the average daily rate. Average daily rate. Now, what's this going to tell you? The average daily rate is the price per night that the average Airbnb in that area goes for. So when I'm working with people in any property that I look at, now the numbers are a little bit different as I continue to scale out. But especially starting out and depending on how much capital you have, you want to look at anything above about $150 to $200 per night daily rate. Why? Anything, in my opinion, that is lower than this is just, it's not going to be so easy to be profitable. So if you can find an area where they're charging $150, $200 on average per night for those Airbnbs or even higher, then you have some more meat on the bone where once you put that property up for rent on the platforms, you'll be able to make profit after your expenses. Number two, that was number one, right? Number two is the occupancy rate. So how occupied generally are those properties in that area? And the number here, you want to look and focus on areas that have at least a 70% or greater occupancy rate. Okay? And that helps you understand that there's a very healthy demand and properties are being booked. So keep these two, number one and number two, metrics in mind when you're on AirDNA. Okay? So you just plug in that website and you can look it up. There's a free version and then there's also a paid version. So you want to start out looking at AirDNA when it comes to actually doing that deeper research. Now, another thing AirDNA is going to give you, you can type in an address and whatever properties that you're looking at, it's going to give you an estimate on how much gross revenue that property will bring in on an annual basis. And they're able to do that by scraping certain data. So while it's not always extremely accurate, it'll give you the ballpark that you need for you to make an informed decision. And it does get pretty close. So it's quite a reliable resource and you absolutely need to use this when you're doing your homework. So again, more for, legal and compliance as far as what you require for legality of Airbnb in a particular area. Airbnb is a great place to start. Also use Google, use ChatGPT, where you can type in, what are the regulations for Airbnb in XYZ city or town? And it's going to give you everything. So typically, you might need a license, you might need a permit, or if Airbnb is not allowed, then you'll know and you'll move on to the next place. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing your research is HOAs. I like to focus on single family homes because in my experience, they've yielded a greater profit. So, and you need less of them. You can make a very healthy income just on 1, 2, 3 properties, 4 or 5 properties. You don't need to have so many doors, each scraping by with like very small margins. You don't need to do that. So if you have a select few properties, you can make a very healthy income doing that. All right. So yeah, focus on, for Airbnb.com, it's good to figure out those initial regulations, and AirDNA is going to give you the metrics around different properties. You can plug in the properties that you're looking at, see what they would gross. And then also, these are the two kind of key metrics. AirDNA, by the way, gives you a lot of data points. These are the two crucial ones that you want to look at when you're doing that research. Now, aside from regulations and compliance and all of that, once you've found the city or town and now you're just looking for properties, so what are the characteristics of a property that you want that's going to win? Well, I'll tell you this right now, and we're going to get into it deeper into the training, but the number one most important aspect of Airbnb in 2025, because the game has completely changed, is your amenities. Amenities are crucial. So what do I mean by amenities? Pretty much things to do at the house. So number one, for example, a pool. Okay? And not in any particular order, but these are just some general amenities that tend to do well. A spa. What's really big now is there's also saunas, a pickleball court, or basketball court. Now, look, I know some of these sound pretty extreme, okay? But this is what's going to help you absolutely dominate. Now, you don't need these. I'm just giving you some really, really good ones so that if you do come across a property or you're buying a property, if you can install these amenities, you're going to be so well booked because you're going to stand out from your competition. And that's how you win in 2025. So game rooms, I'll do it over here. A game room, mini movie theater room. Okay. So here's how Airbnb has changed in this year. You can no longer just throw up a property and, scrape by, barely put any furniture, and just have a bare bones property. It's not going to do well. All right. I'll just tell you that right now. I'll save you the time. I'll save you the money. But if you're able to incorporate these elements and execute on the remaining steps that I share in this training, you're going to do very, very well, and Airbnb is alive and well. And my students are proving it. My properties are proving it. This is just going to be what you need to focus on, is implementing amenities like this that stick out. All right. So as you're looking for properties, if they already have these, so typically like a pool and a spa, a lot of properties at a particular level or a neighborhood, especially if you're in a warmer area or people travel to your city or town or destination in the summer or any time of year, really, a pool and a spa is pretty, you're pretty well positioned to do quite well. And then you can add saunas or a pickleball court or basketball court. So for example, I added a pickleball court to one of my properties few months back, about six months or so back, and it absolutely helped me crush. Right after that, I was getting more bookings, and people were booking my property just because of the pickleball court, leaving those comments in the reviews and messaging me during the inquiries and literally saying, hey, we're literally getting this property because we love pickleball, we're coming to play pickleball. So just an example of how important your amenities are. So the more amenities you can stack, this is the key. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're going to get into Airbnb, the more amenities you can stack, whether your property comes with those or you can see the area where you can convert a room into a movie theater room or anything like that, or a garage. A great way to convert a garage and make it useful is turning the garage into a game room. These are exactly how you're going to dominate and actually make money and be very profitable on Airbnb in 2025. Okay? So that's part of your research right there. It's all part of your research before you go invest in a property, regardless of the type of method you're doing with Airbnb, whether it's arbitrage or purchasing or there's also co-hosting. That's what I want you to focus on, because your success is going to come from how good your property is. That is the whole game this year. All right. So what I want to talk about are a couple different ways you can do Airbnb. All right. Number one, let's talk about rental arbitrage first, which is for typically if you don't have that much capital to start. Rental arbitrage is a great way to start on Airbnb. All the other principles for market research apply when you're either buying or doing rental arbitrage. And there's another option, which I'll talk about as a bonus in just a few minutes here. But I want to talk about, what is Airbnb rental arbitrage? Airbnb rental arbitrage is when you approach a landlord, you find a property that's listed on, Zillow, Realtor.com, anywhere online, and you approach the landlord and you say, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I have a corporate leasing company, and essentially what you're doing is locking in a 12, 18, 24-month lease, and then with the landlord's permission, you are relisting that property on Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, get those bookings, and then you're generating your revenue. So, for example, let me tell you how this works. Let's say you find a property for $3,000 a month, right? $3,000. Let me use another marker. 3,000, right? So your rent is $3K. Let's say you've got another $500 in utilities, right? So all your expenses, internet, landscaping, let's say you have a pool. Let's call it another, let's just call it another $500 in expenses. So all in, you're at $4,000 a month, per month. Then you go list it on Airbnb, and once you've done the proper research and you've got all the amenities and you've got the right property and you've done the rest of the steps that we're going to talk about, that property could be generating, let's say, $8,000 a month on average, right? I'm making these numbers up as we go to give you the idea. So simple math here, right? After your expenses, you're left with $4,000 a month in profit. You don't own the property. You didn't have to put much down. Now, let me tell you the costs of what it typically costs to get into Airbnb rental arbitrage. But right out the gate, you're looking at your rent, your utilities, landscaping fee, maybe a pool maintenance person, and let's call it $4K. But then you're left with whatever difference you make is your profit. Okay? You don't have to, now what are the pros of this? You don't have to go buy a house. You have less risk because you don't own the property. And it's a great way to build cash flow, start out, learn the ropes of Airbnb. And once you accumulate all of that experience and you accumulate all the cash, then you can go out and become an actual property owner and list those on Airbnb and rent those out as well. So what does it typically cost to start on rental arbitrage? So with rental arbitrage, you typically have to put, since you're getting a longer term lease, you need the security deposit, which I also teach you how to negotiate so that you can actually get a couple of weeks, even a month of free rent. Yes, it's possible. And what you do need is funds for furnishing the property and getting the property ready. So depending on where you are, what city, how big the property is, on average, my students are looking at anywhere from 10, so let's say $15,000 to start, okay? 10 to 15K, just, yeah. 10 to 15K in furniture. This is for 3-bed to 4-bed, 2 to 3 baths, right? And of course, if you have an outdoor, you're furnishing the outside. But all of this is done online. You order all of that, all that furniture online. You can look at Amazon is a great place, especially when you're just starting out. You don't need to be fancy. You really don't need to be fancy with all the furniture, because what is important is your design. I'm going to get into this in the future, but let's just talk about startup costs. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Amazon, furniture, Wayfair, we'll come back to these. Some great places to just start out. And then later, if you're in a more luxury market, maybe you can order some nicer pieces from other places. But really you want quality, not anything too expensive, because you can have quality without paying too much money. So this is your startup costs, all right? And then, you know, I know you have to get your LLC, which costs a couple $100, right? LegalZoom. So you've got your furniture. Let me just write this again. Startup costs are costs. You have your furniture, which is, let's call it 10,000 to 15,000, right? And you know, your LLC, which is a couple $100, which you can just use LegalZoom or any one of these online services, and you can just lock in your LLC, and that makes you a professional and legal business, which also allows you to look more professional in the eyes of all the landlords, and it protects you legally as you're conducting business. So these are the startup costs for rental arbitrage. Now, you can even save a lot of money here if the property comes furnished. A lot of people are renting their properties already furnished, and all you'll have to do is come in and maybe you can enhance the furniture or add some amenities, and then you can really slash this cost even more. So that's kind of a hack, but the furniture has to be pretty good and it has to match. There has to be a nice vibe when you're looking. So part of your research, by the way, when you're selecting properties, is you want to make sure that your property is at least as nice or nicer than the surrounding properties on Airbnb. So you're also going to do that research on AirDNA, as I mentioned earlier, and you're going to go on Airbnb.com to the area where you're looking at properties and compare the properties that are doing the best. Okay? And what do I mean by properties doing the best? So on top of AirDNA showing you certain gross numbers and all the metrics that they have, you're personally going to go to Airbnb.com, find properties in your area, and you're going to see how booked are the calendars. Okay, and so you can get an idea. So just comparatively, if you look at one property and it's booked, you know, quite well in advance, then you know they're doing something right. And you want to look at what exactly type of furniture and amenities they have and what the demographic is that goes there. For example, if your area is known for golf tournaments or tennis tournaments, maybe you want a let's stick to the golf, right? You want a little mini golf range or a little putt-putt or a driving range. So for example, a couple of my properties are in some golfing areas. So I have a mini driving range and a putt-putt over in the side of the house in the yard, and people love that. So golfers come and they just, they're in the yard hitting the balls, and they book the property just for that. So you want to know your demographic as part of the research that you're doing. So this is all part of step number 1. Okay, so this is the startup cost for Arbitrage. And what I also want to talk a little bit about, there is a third bonus opportunity in Airbnb that I'm going to get into. But the second thing I want to talk about, which is really important if you're trying to buy a property. So why would you want to buy an Airbnb? There's many, many reasons you want to buy an Airbnb in 2025. And there's a lot of pros. Let's talk about the pros and then the cons. You need more startup capital than you do for rental arbitrage when you're buying typically, right? Because you have to go buy the house. You have to put a down payment down. So typically, you're looking at least a 10, 15, 20% down payment. Usually it's a 20% down payment if you're going through the banks. But what I mentioned in the beginning of this video is there are ways using creative finance strategies to buy a property even for between 3 and 5% rates. Yes, in 2025. Now you might be asking, how do you do that? There is something called subject to, and let's go right into this, right? Subject to, when you buy a property subject to, you're buying it subject to the existing loan. So for example, let's say in today's, you go to the bank, let's do a quick comparison. You want to buy, let's keep the numbers very simple. Let's say $500K for the house. If you go to the bank, you're going to need typically 20% down, which is, in this case, $100,000. Not everyone has $100,000 laying around, right? Now, and you have to get qualified, right? You have to have the money down, and you have to, go to the bank, go through the whole qualification process. You need to have your credit score intact so that you could get an interest rate that is not going to destroy you. And in 2025, rates are what? Rates are between 6, 7, pretty much between 6 and 8%. And if you go to an investment loan, it's even higher right now. Okay? So how do we get around this? There's something called subject to. So if you buy a property subject to the existing loan, and that loan was acquired a few years ago where interest rates were extremely low, 2.85 to 5%, and I'm going to show you how to find these properties, you can purchase the property subject to that loan. So the property transfers over to you, title and all that, and the loan, the note, stays in the previous owner's name, and you're making payments on that behalf. So that's how you can end up getting a property for 2.85% rate to between there and 5%. So I just not too long ago purchased one of my best performing Airbnbs, and the rate was 4.75. Whereas when I went to the bank was telling me the best rate at the time was 8.5%, 9% for an investment loan, which was crazy, and that would have completely destroyed the deal. Now, why would that have destroyed the deal? So for example, let's say, and again, I don't have a calculator in front of me, so bear with me. You know what? Maybe I'll just use a calculator just so that you can get an idea. So if you're looking at, there's a huge difference in what you can save if you go with the bank and get a, let's call it a 7.5% rate. You're going to have a much higher payment than if you got it for, let's say, 4.75 rate. Okay? So if we take a look, 7.5 rate for a 20% down on a 500K, you're looking at about $3,300 per month of a mortgage. Whereas if you do something at 4.5% for a 500K down or a property at $500,000, a 4.75 rate, you're pretty much looking at about $2,300. So look how much you're saving, $1,000, which is about 30%. Okay? So that's all going to give you much more room to make a deal actually make sense versus not. And that is the power of purchasing a property subject to. Now, you can also negotiate with the seller, and you can also do seller financing. So many different strategies that you can do in 2025 to make Airbnb worth it as an acquisition as well. All right. So that cash flow that you're going to be able to keep back in your pocket is very important to make a deal make sense. So back to basically my example, it was basically I got half the interest rate. Now do the math on that. Half the interest rate because I purchased property subject to, and I didn't have to go to the bank at the time where rates were really, really at their peak. And that's what made this property very profitable and a great investment, at least even on the cash flow side. All right. Then there's also the equity gain, which is how you build wealth. You build wealth in real estate via the equity gained. All right. And then lastly, one could argue one of the most important reasons is the tax benefits. Okay. So there's something called the short-term rental loophole where you can accelerate depreciation. And then especially if you have a W-2, if you're a W-2 earner, you can go purchase a property. And I'm not a CPA, so you can talk to your CPA or your tax strategist about this. But then you can write off that property's accelerated depreciation, and then you're going to save a huge tax bill. And that's a massive advantage when you're purchasing property. So keep this in mind. And then the way you're going to find these properties, there's certain criteria when you're looking for a property and buying it subject to. And typically it's when the listing has been sitting for quite a while. Properties that have been purchased between 2020 and 2022, because really low interest rates were locked in back then. And that is exactly how you can really snipe some great deals. And a software that can help you do that, a tool, if you go to PropStream, you can see, and also you're gonna go to your realtor and have them talk to other agents, and they can help you understand what rate they locked in and what the existing details are on a certain mortgage. They're going to talk to the owner of the property and see if they're open to doing a subject to transaction. And the longer the listing has been listed, the seller will be more motivated and interested and willing to figure out a deal that's outside of the bank and even do seller financing and give you alternative options, which you can also negotiate the property's down payment. So you can figure out a lot of concessions, especially in this market, and make sure that it's a win-win for both you and the seller. PropStream PropStream.com lets you look up and filter properties all across the country at very granular levels of detail. It goes Zillow, Realtor.com. You can also search these properties and how long they've been listed. You want to find anything that's been listed for typically more than 60 to 90 days. Put those filters in Zillow, Realtor, and especially PropStream, and then you'll find all the properties with the sellers had it listed there for quite a while. He or she is going to be more open to negotiating and alternative methods to sell their property. So great way to get a great property in 2025. And this will make or break the difference between a property being a good deal or not being a good deal. Okay. So on that point, a lot of the reason people are saying Airbnb died previously is because the rates shot up so high that you could no longer buy a property through the bank and it have enough meat on the bone left to justify the deal being good. It took up so much of those profits. But if you're able to bypass that by doing something like this, you have a great deal on your hands when you find that type of property. Okay, so that is purchasing a property. And I love helping my students negotiate those deals because it's all in negotiation, making a property, only investing in a property that makes sense. You have to make sure the property and the numbers make sense. So one of the first things I do when I work with people one-on-one is give them my deal analyzer. I give them all of those components that I look at. They just plug it away, and then we can analyze the deal and say, hey, does it make sense to purchase this property? We take in all the metrics from AirDNA, we do all the research on Airbnb, and then we plug in all the numbers, and see what kind of cash on cash return we can get if we were to invest in that property. And from there, you know how to negotiate. And this is what I love helping my students with, is how to negotiate a deal that is a winner for you and also a winner for the seller. All right. So a third bonus strategy, it's one that you can start for literally $0. You can do what is called co-hosting. Okay, so this is a bonus. Co-hosting is essentially where you do not rent the property, you do not own the property. What you go do is you go to Zillow or Realtor or any of these websites that list properties, and you find listings where a landlord has already put their property up for rent. And again, you kind of want to find, it's a little easier if you find properties that have been listed and have not been rented out for quite a while. You contact the landlord, and you're going to do all the property management, which you'll obviously automate as well as you scale out, but you're going to list that property on Airbnb, VRBO, you handle all the cleanings, and remember, they're not rented out now. So they're actually listening how you can solve that problem for them because they're bleeding money every month by not having their property rented. You're gonna take over that property, get it in ready shape for all these platforms, manage all of that. So let's say you find a property and it's listed for $5,000 a month. It's got great amenities. And again, no matter what strategy you use, you're going to follow all of step one, the market research. All of that still applies. So you find the property listed for 5K and the owner agrees with you on the whole concept of co-hosting, which you're going to explain to them. There's a very particular way to do that. And you're going to just take a cut. So between 15 and up to 30% of whatever you generate. So let's say you're able to make $10,000 a month on that property on Airbnb. If you charge, let's just go with the middle, 20%, you just made $2,000 for doing what? Listing the property on all the platforms, managing and handling the cleanings, which you're going to automate and you're going to hire a virtual assistant, and taking care of the property, getting the listings done, the photography done right, and just preparing it with the rest of the steps I'm going to share with you in this training. And you're just going to collect, you're basically a property manager and you're collecting your, no matter what they generate, you're taking your percentage of that revenue. All right. So a great model if you're starting out, and all you need is your LLC, again, which is, let's call it about $200 to start. Okay. And eventually, again, the goal, and I want to emphasize this, and this is what I share with everyone I work with, eventually you do want to become a property owner or a real estate investor where you own the properties, because then you get the tax advantages and the equity gain. Okay, so you've done your market research. And now we're on the next step. Okay, so whether you've done rental arbitrage, you've purchased your property, or you're doing co-hosting. And I really want to focus on the arbitrage and the purchasing of the properties. But regardless, these steps apply throughout the rest of the process. The next thing you want to do, step number 2, is furnishing and designing the property. Okay? So you do not need to be a designer. You don't need to have the fanciest, most expensive furniture. But what you want to do is make sure that your property is at least as nice or a little bit nicer when it comes to the furnishing and design as the properties that are winning in your market. So that ties into step number 1, the market research. But when it comes to furnishing, you don't need to spend, especially when you're starting off, too much money. All you need to do is, for finding the design, go to Pinterest or look at the listings in Airbnb that are doing the best and are the most booked, so you can see it from the calendar, and see how they are designing their properties and make yours at least the same or a little bit better. Okay, I was not a designer. My girlfriend actually does interior design and has a really good eye for that, so she helped a lot for my properties. But again, some of the properties that I purchased came furnished, and then I just added some nice pieces to them. So back to Pinterest. Pinterest, you can draw so much inspiration from different type of bedrooms, different type of living rooms, layouts, and you're just going to type in, let's say you have a more modern or contemporary, or you have like a mid-century type of home. You're going to just type that in and type in living room, mid-century living room, and then see what it comes out with. And then you're going to just pull in that furniture into your own design. And where are you going to find that furniture? You're going to look at, very simple, Amazon and Wayfair. You can find some great pieces here. And what I tell everyone that I work with is you do not need to have the most expensive furniture. You just have to have nice furniture. It looks nice, but you don't have to break the bank trying to find and buy the most expensive pieces, especially when you're starting out. I certainly did not do that. So all you've got to do, draw that inspiration, order everything on Amazon, on Wayfair, because really it comes into the design and having a property that's at least as nice, if not a little bit nicer, which feeds into your research, the market research. So you already know what's going to work and what isn't. And always look at Pinterest, look at Amazon, Wayfair, and of course, Airbnb listings that are winning. Get a better marker here. So this is step number 2. Make sure that you're not overspending, but you definitely don't want to underspend. Okay? So that covers furnishing and designing the property. Number 3, once you've furnished the property, once you've designed the property, what you're going to do is make sure it's very staged, nicely put together, which brings me to number 3, which is your photography. All right? Photography. Photography is, and this is what I tell everybody, do not try to underspend or cheap out when it comes to your photographers. This is the most important piece of marketing. Number 1 important step in marketing your property. Okay? Because your photos are how you sell your property on any of the listings. They're going to carry on to Airbnb, Verbo, Booking, and that is what's going to make someone stop, click, compare you to anybody else, and move forward with yours. So you want to have extremely great photos. Now, where do you find a good photographer? You can go to Thumbtack. Is a great place. You can find photographers and freelance workers. Upwork. Fiverr. Okay? And make sure you request the book of business of every photographer that you speak with. So ask for maybe 3, 4, or 5 photographers, and whoever can give you the best quality of work. They've done real estate photography and they've done Airbnb photography. Look at all their work, look at their listing images, the images that they've provided to you in their book of business, and whoever has the best quality is who you're going to move forward with. And when it comes to, they're going to know this, when it comes to your actual photos, you're going to want 2 types of photos. You're going to want both daytime and twilight. So what's twilight? Twilight photos are right before the sunset, and you can get some amazing photos. It's actually a great type of photo to get as your main image. Right as the sun is setting, you can capture in your photos, by the way, whether it's daytime or twilight, your hero image, which is going to have as much of the amenities and the best angle and the best shot of your house. So if you have a backyard with a pool and a spa, you want to get an angle, and your photographer will know this and help you with it. And you capture all of the best elements of your property with that hero photo, because that's going to be your main image. Okay? They're going to take daytime photos of inside and outside, twilight photos of inside and outside, and these come out looking great. And not everybody has twilight, but the competition has stepped up. So a lot of properties are starting to get twilight images and have started getting twilight images. And I can tell you most certainly, any listing that is crushing it in your area, I'm positive would have twilight photos. They just look great, and you're going to need both of these. Another thing you can do is drone photos if you have a nice backyard. All right, so that covers photography, which leads me to my next step, which is actually hiring your staff. Now, you could do this step concurrently and at the same time as the previous one, where you are getting the most important team member, which is your cleaner or cleaners. Your cleaners are effectively your property managers. So you want to make sure that you are vetting them out and making sure that they do a phenomenal job, because they pretty much run your whole Airbnb operation. So the cleaners, you can also find them on Thumbtack or Fiverr, Upwork, okay? And they need to have done Airbnb cleanings, especially when you're hiring them. You need to make sure, if you chat with 3-4 different companies or individuals on any of these websites or apps, make sure that they've done Airbnb cleanings before. Very, very important, because the detail that goes into thoroughly cleaning at a professional level an Airbnb and preparing it after every guest has left for the next guest is so crucial to giving that sense of cleanliness and making sure that your guests that do come in can immediately tell, wow, this place is managed and run professionally. Okay, this will make or break the difference between you getting 5-star reviews or 4, 3, 2, 1-star reviews, which you never want. Okay, so we both know the idea where we walk into a hotel or an Airbnb and you find a hair, and that just paints a negative picture for the rest of your stay. You do not want to have to deal with that, and you certainly don't want your Airbnb or reviews to reflect that, excuse me. So the next thing also, you've got your cleaners, is if you've done this correctly, you want to have a pool. So typically a pool in the spa, you're going to need a pool maintenance person. And if you have a backyard, front yard, any sort of lawn, you're going to need a landscaper. Okay? So really important with your cleaners can actually also help you stage your property and prepare it for a previous step, which is number 3. So that's why I was saying you don't have to do step 4 and 3 separately. And then also make sure your pool maintenance and landscapers were at your property right before your photographers on photo day, so that logistically all of that is coordinated and you have the property in the cleanest, most prepared state, ready for your photos to be as good as they possibly can, because that is going to be how your property is represented. So these are the most important hires that you're going to make in your Airbnb business. All right. Okay. So once you've hired your staff, next is automation. Which are your tools, softwares. So you got into Airbnb for generating as much of a passive income as you possibly can. Airbnb is semi-passive, and the tools are going to help you automate all of that. And the most important tools, in my opinion, that I first get my students onto is your pricing software. So what does pricing software do? Pricing software, and by the way, do not use Airbnb's smart pricing. Please, you will leave a lot of money on the table, and I would not recommend it. I would recommend Price Labs or Beyond Pricing. I've used both. And what these tools do is they're going to automatically understand and know in the market how much your Airbnb should be priced at. They know what all your competitors are priced at, and they understand through their data what events are going on in your area and the seasonality. So you don't have to manually do that. But for example, if there's a big event in your area, they're automatically going to increase the pricing so that you can get top dollar. You don't want to leave any money on the table, right? We're running a business and we want it to be as profitable as possible. So these tools are going to help make sure that your property is priced correctly and automate all of that adjusted pricing for you so that you don't have to do it manually. The next tool is your listing management software, which is going to be Hospitable. So what does Hospitable do? Hospitable has multiple purposes. It centralizes all of your listings. So if you have multiple listings across multiple platforms, even if you have one listing, across multiple platforms. It's going to centralize all of that. It's going to track all of your revenue. It's going to centralize all the communications. It's going to automate those communications. For instance, when someone is checking in or checking out, automatic messages. If someone inquires about your property, there's going to be an automated message that goes out to them. All of that is done through Hospitable. It also, like I mentioned, tracks all of your revenue, and it's something that you can hand off eventually once you scale to your virtual assistant, and they can manage all of your listings, communications through Hospitable so that you don't have to do that manually. It's a huge game changer, and it's going to save you a bunch of time. So these are the two main softwares. Now there's plenty of other softwares, especially as you start to scale, that you can use. There's certain softwares that help you automate your cleanings and notify your cleaners. All of that, in my opinion, you can do once you have a bigger operation. But once you're starting out, when you scale out beyond 2-3 properties, then you can start really gaining the value out of those. This is more than enough for you to run and manage your property, okay? Especially starting out. All right, so once you've automated all of this, now it's time to go live. And that brings me to getting your first booking in 24 to 48 hours. So here's where all of your hard work pays off. And if you've followed all of these steps, step by step, this is the most exciting part. I remember when I got my very first booking, it was a complete game changer and motivated me to work harder and continue scaling. So this is what you're going to experience if you follow all of these steps, step by step in 2025. All right. So thank you for watching. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure to like and subscribe. It helps the channel tremendously, where I can get a lot of this free content out for you. And for those of you that want to work with me one-on-one, make sure you click the link in the description and apply and see if you qualify. I work with a few students every single month where I personally walk you through this entire process step by step until you get your first property and even scale out to multiple properties depending on whatever your goal is. Be great.